Hey, let's bring in a guest to help us flush this out. The great Dimitri Filipovic of the PDOCast joins us now. Dimitri, thank you for joining us, sir.
Fellas, what's going on?
How are you, buddy?
I'm good. It's good to be here.
How do you make sense of...
Pete's been big timing me. I've been trying to get on the show all season, and he keeps saying, "All right, I'll get you on." So I'm glad you guys finally pulled the trigger.
Have you really?
No,
Yeah.
he's being a bit of a jerk.
Oh,
I've been trying all season. I've been
Fuck
messaging
you,
Pete. I'm like,
dropping
Pete, come on my show. I'll come on yours. And he's like, no, it's fine.
We've wanted to do this for a while, but you have a busy fucking schedule and you do your show every day too. So it's been a little bit more difficult. What are your thoughts on Lindy Ruff to the Buffalo Sabres?
Yeah, I see both sides of it. I'm okay with it ultimately. I think you made a great point. I was listening, sitting in the green room while you guys were talking there, and it's who he brings on his staff, right? Because I think this Sabres team, like part of why they struggled so much this year was their power play took such a step back. And I think part of that is Tage being hurt and not being able to rip one-timers as I wear my Tage Thompson tee here. So I got to stay on brand. But I think if he brings in someone who can help kind of flesh that out and improve the power play, I could see that team taking a big step, and it might not necessarily be competing for a Stanley Cup, but it's kind of baby steps for that organization, right? They just need to make the playoffs first. So I think they can do that next season.
do you think that some of the adult, and we'll maybe even say super duper senior adult, he's younger than I thought he would be. If you said how old is Lindy Ruff, I'd be like
80?
82.
Yeah.
Easy. He's 64. So
What?
He just looks shitty for his age, I guess.
He's also been around forever.
I would have guessed like a low 70s.
64?
But
God
how
damn.
much do you think it is having an experienced person both in hockey and in being alive? Like that team needs a fucking old guy.
I think so. Yeah, you're right. I'm shocked that he's not at least 70. But I guess he has been around forever. And honestly, 64 for an NHL coach is a very young buck at this point. I think it'll help. Like I think the vibes under Granato 2 years ago were obviously kind of the reason why they took a big step. This past year, they were banged up. Everything kind of came crashing back down to earth. I think certainly some stability and some veteran leadership can help. Like I think they need to improve tactically though. Like it's one thing to just kind of play back and forth pond hockey. It's another to actually have a plan for when a team traps you in the neutral zone and forces you to dump it in. And that's something Granato and the Sabres had nothing of this past season. So hopefully Ruff and his staff are going to address that this season.
Do you think that with the Middlestat trade and bring in Bo Byram, like a new coach now has a better palette with which to work? Because I think that for a while it was like, all right, Sabres are just fucking loading up on these skilled guys and everything. And yeah, they got their 2 high picks back there on defense, whatever. They'll just fucking figure it out. But now you come into this team, yeah, they've got the stars up front. Although the chat has been hammering us with they could use a Jack Eichel type player. But you've got multiple really good young defensemen. You got multiple goalies. I won't say there's no excuse to not make the playoffs because it's the Sabres and they do have that stank about them. But I think a coach comes into this and is like, yeah, I can fucking work with this.
There's no excuse, guys. The Islanders and the Capitals made the playoffs this year. Like the fact that them and the Devils finished below these teams in the standings is such like a bag fumbling, in my opinion. And the Sabres really, I mean, they had their own injuries similar to the Devils, but yeah, I think there's no excuse. Like next year, they not only have to make the playoffs, but actually like compete for winning a round and showing us that this is legit and not just kind of like a fun team.
We all seem to agree that we wanted Craig Berube there more than anybody else. And if you look at the current landscape, is there a place that Craig Berube maybe is prioritizing over Buffalo? Like I have one spot in my mind, and it's kind of directly linked to this. I think Craig Berube in New Jersey would be great.
Yeah, I imagine every coach in the market right now is kind of holding out, waiting to see whether they just bring back Travis Green full time or whether they hire someone else, because that's obviously such a desirable landing spot. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Who else is looking right now? Like I'm sure like
LA?
in a couple weeks when the season ends. Yeah, LA. Yeah, they could use someone for game 2.
That would be incredible. After that,
they just
like,
parachute Berube
okay.
in
Coaching
Rogers'
change
place or whatever.
Oilers also have fucking cut Darnell Nurse. Like just madness. Unrecognizable teams.
I mean, Columbus. I don't know if Pascal Vincent is going to be the guy there.
Not.
Okay, so here's my theory on that note. I think the Blue Jackets should hire Don Granato and hope to replicate the vibes that he brought to the Sabres 2 years ago. And if anything, I think Granato, because I'm skeptical that he's like a tactician enough to actually be an NHL coach for like competing for a Stanley Cup, but he's clearly great with young players and like building relationships and all that and welcoming them into the league. Every young organization should essentially just hire him. He should be like a rotating coach where like every year he just goes to a new spot, improves their vibes, and makes everyone have fun playing hockey again. And then you bring in an actual coach that is going to like work on the X's and O's.
There are coaches like, I mean, I was talking about it with the New England Patriots with Bill Parcells, where like, yes, he brought them to a Super Bowl, but there are certain coaches that you do want to have to either have them knock out the shit, have them move forward a little bit, knowing that they're not going to be the long-term guy. An analogy that we used early in the season with talking about Lindy Ruff is he's the guy that drives you to the airport. And once you arrive at the airport, you're not sure if anybody bought the tickets, but you've at least been driven to the airport. So at that point, maybe you have to go inside, go to a desk, ask somebody else for tickets. I do think that Lindy Ruff can be the person that furthers what the Sabres are trying to do. And if not furthers it, at least corrects a little bit, because they have kind of gone back off track.
I mean, and to your point for Granato, like, but isn't that the purpose of an assistant coach? Like, isn't the assistant coach kind of who fills in the gaps and kind of does things beyond just getting a team to win?
Probably. Yeah. I'd say
like
he might
Don
be
Granato
best
would be a
suited to
great
be an
assistant somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I heard Lindy Ruff's looking for assistants.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think like, man, I would love to see David Carl in Columbus. That'd be amazing. But
yeah, I mean, it seems like he's going to be, and he deserves this, but he's going to be very picky about what job he takes. Like, I think he's going to be waiting for not only the bag, but also like the perfect spot to win. So
David Carl to me is more like if the Rangers needed a coach, that sort of thing, like a team that has more of a mix. Because I think that if you drop David Carl into Columbus, and I think he's going to be a good NHL coach, but I just think there are a lot of teams that can't afford to go with an inexperienced coach right now. And boy, oh boy, I mean, if there's a team...
Columbus tried to go the experience route, and how'd that turn out for them?
Well, they went with the guy that we all fucking knew, like not that fucking guy. But like, honestly, like I wouldn't have hated it if fucking Columbus brought in Lindy Ruff. Like they need somebody. You want to talk about a team that is somehow more aimless than the Buffalo Sabres? It's the Blue Jackets. In even their leadership, I like those guys, but they need leadership coming from somewhere, and they don't have it anywhere right now. So Carl, I would honestly hate for them. What do you make of the postseason so far?
It's been fun, man. It's been fun. Only a couple days in, obviously. I like the first 2 days where there was like no overlapping games, so I could just watch them all one at a time and fully immerse myself. Yesterday was a bit stressful, juggling like pretty much all 4 games at once at one point. But no, it's been fun. I think when you watch like the West compared to the East, it's almost like they're playing different sports. Like the East certainly has some interesting matchups, but it feels like the West is just like a heavyweight bout where they're just throwing haymakers at each other.
Who do you think is so far the most dominant? I think like the final score didn't do it justice, but that was a fucking shit kicking by the Oilers last night.
Yeah, I'm trying to track all these games just to have some of my own stats because I don't really trust the public ones. And I'm only done the first period of that Oilers-Kings game, but I had the Oilers with 14 scoring chances in the first period. And like in some of these other games, that's been like a good offensive output for a full game for some of these teams. So I think the Oilers are probably going to get into 30 by the time I finish tracking it. And yeah, I mean, 7 goals like doesn't do justice to just how much they created and how much they tore the Kings up.
I know you're a big Mark Stone guy. What do you make of the third year in a row in which we've seen Mark Stone miraculously recover right before game 1?
Yeah, I mean, how long are you guys having me on for? Because I feel like we could probably do 45 minutes on just that alone. I don't necessarily want to get into it too much. I think there's like way more nuance than people are willing to admit. But I think like he looked pretty rusty yesterday. He looked like a guy who's probably not 100%, right? Like Logan Stankoven just sunned him at the end of the first period. And Stankoven's awesome, and he does that to a lot of people. But it's kind of unfamiliar territory seeing Stone get schooled like that at pretty much his own special trick.
Yeah, that was
scored
incredible.
on his first shift, baby.
That's
and he did
true.
look rusty. But I'll tell you what, we'll talk later more about the Stars and Knights, but a lot of people on the Knights did not look good last night, and they still end up winning that game. So if I'm the Stars, I'm saying, fuck, this is going to be a close series. This is one that we probably needed to win when he was rusty, when the goaltending was bad, all of that. But just in general, what do you make of that series? Because so far, the returns on the money they spent with Stone on LTIR looks very good.
Yeah, I mean, Hurdle looks awesome in front of the net in particular. He scored one of his own goals. I think he had a screen on the Stone goal itself. Yeah, it's a bit of a tough series for Dallas, not only because Vegas is one of the few teams that kind of theoretically has the depth to match them, but also at the risk of kind of nerding out too much here on X's and O's. Vegas boxes out or fronts so much in their zone and they try to block everything. And that's a problem for Dallas, who looks to like tip pucks with Pavelski and that top line in particular so much. And you saw that in game one. And I think Ryan Callahan pointed out in the broadcast that it gave them problems and essentially that top line got completely neutralized. So I think that's something Dallas is going to have to work around, but it seems like it's certainly going to be like a really tricky matchup for them.
One of my favorite things in the playoffs is that every year there's somebody who kind of has like a coming out party, or at least a few people that have a coming out party and raise their profile. You seem to be able to identify those guys before a lot of other people jump on board. Who do you have this year as a strong candidate to kind of be in that category?
Is Seth Jarvis cheating? Like, has he already arrived in the mainstream? I know he's been on your show.
No,
think
but
so.
you know what? So many fucking. I mean, that person we talked about it on our stream. That person in the past has been like Anze Kopitar or Patrice Bergeron or people that like we all knew. Like that guy's fucking awesome, and he's like one of the better players in the NHL. So I guess you can go anywhere with it.
Yeah, I like Jarvis. I think before the playoffs started, he was like plus 14,000 or something to win the Conn Smythe. And Carolina's so deep that like anyone could really win it for them. But I mean, he plays top line, top power play. He might lead them in scoring. You saw the nasty shot he scored on yesterday, and I think they're going to make the Stanley Cup final. So I like Jarvis there. I mean, Wyatt Johnston obviously on the Stars, but he's already scored 30 goals himself. Let me give you kind of a random one. I'm not sure Nashville's going to go far enough to justify this because I think they're going to lose to Vancouver in round one. But Luke Evangelista is someone that people I think need to familiarize themselves with. He's already working his way up the lineup, and you watch in game one, like I thought he was their best, most dangerous player. So I think he's someone who I'm pretty fond of, and I think is going to catch a lot of people's eyes this postseason.
He's also very handsome.
And that helps.
Sure does.
Whether informed by numbers or just your big, beautiful brain, how do you feel about the goalie rotation? Because it has been a big conversation, obviously, with the Bruins. And over the years, typically, if you did that, it wasn't necessarily a recipe for success in the postseason. I like the Bruins are doing it, but what do you make of it?
I'm fine with it. I mean, it was kind of one of their big strengths heading in, right? Everyone talked about what big an advantage it was for them. They did it all year. So if you're using the regular season as kind of like a trial run to get ready for the postseason, they didn't really give Swayman any back-to-back starts to kind of prepare for this. And I thought game two, coming off that win, was the right time to do it because now you can just go back to Swayman in game three and feel confident with that and move forward with that. Whereas if you went back to Swayman, it would have made it really awkward for going to Allmark eventually. So I thought it was the right move. Obviously didn't work out, but it wasn't because Allmark played poorly or anything. So I'm totally fine with it.
Do you think Bruins fans should be worried at this point in time? I know it's one loss, but William Nylander hasn't been in the series yet. And they looked real bad last night for the last 40 minutes of that game.
Yeah, I'd say particularly the third period, right, where they like the game was on the line and they just couldn't really generate anything. Austin Matthews was just so far and away the best player on the ice. And you're right, like so far they've been able to get away with the third pair because Toronto hasn't really had the depth, but all of a sudden if Willie Nylander is just feasting on that Shattenkirk pair, that becomes alarming. So I think it's probably going to go 7 again, and it'll be very dramatic and chaotic. But yeah, I think it could go either way. But I just like what Matthews did last night was pretty much everything I think everyone's been clamoring for and wanting to see from him. And so if he's just going to play that way, then I don't really think Boston has very many answers for that.
Lastly, I don't know if you're a betting or DFSing man. If you have placed a wager on Conn Smythe, who was it?
I don't bet on hockey, but I did, like I said, I think Seth Jarvis plus 14,000 or Wyatt Johnston was plus 11,000 at the start of the postseason. I like both of those.
All right,
strong
lovely
value bets.
Yeah. Did you bet on Conn Smythe?
I did not. No.
Am I the only Conn Smythe?
You're a big like Conn Smythe at the outset of the playoffs.
Yeah,
guy.
well, I'm gonna pick one guy at the outset of the playoffs.
Yeah, my guy was Pierre-Luc Dubois. So
did you?
Well, I didn't actually.
Amazing.
I did throw a couple dollars on
Incredible.
a little bit of a flyer, being like, if the Kings somehow managed to make magic, it's probably because somebody got good at hockey.
Hey, fourth line center Pierre-Luc Dubois was the only center on the Kings last night, and is my least favorite stat, but if it helps me make a point, I'll use it. Was the only plus center on the Kings last night. That fourth line played very well, even though he took 2 penalties like an idiot.
Okay.
Gotta ask you, Dim, what are you rooting more for in this series? Nathan McKinnon to make it out or Saxophone Squirtle to make it out?
Oh, man. Saxophone Squirtle. Did you see that Jets fan that actually snuck a real-life saxophone into the game? I don't even know how they allowed that, but that's awesome. I have one quick question. I know you guys probably want to get me out of here, but when you placed that PLD Conn Smythe bet, did a gambling helpline immediately reach out to you?
Yeah, I got some phone calls. I had someone show up at my front door making sure I was okay. Wellness check.
We all silly like the mayor.